Well, since the US presidential election, pundits have been struggling to explain Donald Trump's shock win. Prominent Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Žižek is one of them. He believes the result exposes the failure of American political elites.
This traditional machine of manufacturing consent no longer works. 10 years from now, and it's not a joke, I claim, rape will be called, well, why not, enhanced seduction technique.
I think Trump is disgusting. Like, you know, with Trump, I became a racist.
It will be a kind of big awakening. New political processes will be set in motion.
Without further ado, let's talk to the man himself. Slavoj Žižek joins us live from New York. Thanks for joining us here on RT. So good to have you with us today. You've said many unflattering things about the US President-elect Donald Trump, yet you'd also said you'd vote for him. Why do you say that?
It's not that I favor him for what he positively stands. What I'm afraid of is the status quo consensus here. People seem to be getting used to the things don't really change, the same situation just drags on, and we are, I claim, slowly drifting towards ecological catastrophe, maybe a new world war, new racial tensions, and so on and so on. And the Democrats were, in this election, the pure party of the establishment, of the ruling consensus. So, disgusted as I am with Donald Trump, I hope that precisely the shock of electing him will maybe trigger some restructuring of the entire political space where new options will maybe emerge, like an authentic leftist movement around Bernie Sanders and others. I think it's not enough if Hillary were to win. That would give him catastrophe, because it's not enough to say, oh, we avoided the catastrophe and so on. No, the real catastrophe is the status quo. Everything appears okay and so on, but we are slowly drifting towards a catastrophe. We need an awakening.
In the run-up to the election, most mainstream media, as well as most mainstream polls, were predicting overwhelmingly a Hillary Clinton victory. Why did they fail to see this coming?
I think there are a couple of reasons, but maybe the most interesting one is that I think the Democratic strategist totally misread why and in what way people identify with Trump. Most of us who were observing the electoral process remember how often left liberal media claimed, now we caught Donald Trump with his pants down in an open embarrassment when he said something improper or made a mistake, and they thought, now this is his end, he committed suicide. No, not only he didn't, this even helped him, because ordinary people didn't identify with an ideal Trump. They perceived him as one of us precisely through his vulgarities, mistakes, and so on and so on. That's how political identification works. That's a big lesson.
Some of Trump's ideas, though, they're regarded as very dangerous, backwards, xenophobic, certainly by many of the people who are protesting against him right now. Isn't that enough to make Clinton a better choice for America? Many would say so.
Again, although I think not even all Trump's ideas are radically bad. Of course, I'm terrified at his racism, some of his economic ideas, even more. In my old age, becoming more and more, I try to become a person of decency. And to me, the basic ethical catastrophe of Donald Trump is the way he changed the public speech. Tasteless, racist, brutal remarks, which were unthinkable in public space still a couple of years ago, are now commonly accepted. And appearances matter. So that's my problem with Trump. But again, all I am hoping for is that this shock we'll engender will provide an awakening. Look, people say Trump is a madman, he may trigger a new nuclear war. For me, Hillary Clinton, if anything, is more of a cold warrior. So I don't think we should focus on Trump as a person. The crucial thing is to what extent Trump will be influenced by different cliques, circles of people around him. The good thing about Trump was that he, through his shocking rise, put in disorder the Republican Party. But now, people have noticed, now that he is the new face of power, all those who before criticized him want to join the wagon. And there are brutal cold warriors there. So again, the situation is open.
You just mentioned there, Slavoj, with regards to Trump's policies, you said some of them are not radically bad. Which policies do you think, which policies do you perhaps agree with or are not so critical of?
Not that I agree with, but for example, I don't think that in this new Cold War in Europe, Russia and the West, I don't think that any of the two sides is clean. But it looked at some point that Trump is ready to opt for a more conciliatory approach. Second, and that in short, Trump is ready for the United States to make it play United States less than till now, the role of a world policeman. And second thing, for example, once he even said we should show more understanding for Palestinians and so on and so on. But you know, the problem with Trump is that for me, he's not simply evil. He's a brutal, manipulating pragmatic. He says this, a day after he said that. Remember, concerning the wall with Mexico. First it was the wall, then a couple of days ago, some of his representatives said that we shouldn't take this literally, it's a metaphor. Now the latest statement is it's not really a wall, it's a fence and so on. That's Trump. And it's important in this confusion now which force will prevail around Trump.
You mentioned there the new Cold War, the two sides, and Trump's foreign policy towards Russia, his conciliatory position towards Russia is one aspect that is an interesting debate here. But do you think we can really see a defrosting of relations? Can Trump really overrule the Republican Party, the Republican establishment, which are overwhelmingly hostile towards Russia, and stand for a firmer stance in that standoff?
I'm afraid that this is a real danger, that he cannot really control his own establishment. And that's where I am in a panic. I agree with Noam Chomsky, who recently said that now we are no longer dealing just with small local political crises. Maybe even the very survival of humanity is at stake. Again, the possibility of a new world war, ecological catastrophe, other economic disorders, and so on and so on. We need an awakening, and that's why I, maybe a little bit recklessly, think that a Trump victory at least can function as a shock to awaken us. Again, what I didn't like about the prospect of Hillary's victory is that precisely, of course, she would have been in some sense much better, more open for social, other freedoms and so on. But this would have put us asleep in the sense of, okay, we avoided the worst, now we can sleep calmly. No, we cannot. Again, we need an awakening.
Speaking of an awakening, this presidential campaign saw the emergence of Bernie Sanders as well, a Democratic candidate, as an alternative to Clinton, who was perceived as an establishment candidate, of course. Do you think Bernie Sanders could have shaken up the US political system as much as Trump, or perhaps had he been the Democratic candidate,
Absolutely.
we may even have a different
Absolutely.
president?
And I will, yes, and I go even further. I think that the big mistake, another mistake of Democratic Party is that the way they dispose in a very brutal way of Bernie Sanders. I think that Hillary's defeat was, at least in one of his aspects, the price she paid for getting rid of Bernie Sanders. Because, you know, there is now all around the United States, but not only in the United States, a big popular rage. People are not dissatisfied with the establishment and so on and so on. And as many political observers noted, people who vote for Trump are often, in their social situation, in their political stance, similar to those who vote for Sanders. They are anti-establishment people. So I think that after getting rid of Sanders, Hillary thought we should move more to the center to reach out to Trump voters. No, Hillary should have moved more to the left to seize that popular rage, and this would have enabled her, paradoxically, to get also some of the votes of otherwise Trump supporters. But because she moved to the center, she was even more perceived as the establishment candidate, losing many of anti-establishment votes. And that's the tragedy. It's a nice paradox for Hillary to win. She should not have played the role of the big unifier. Her coalition was absurd. Her coalition was Wall Street and Occupy Wall Street, Saudi Arabian money and LGBT and all those sexual liberation movements and so on and so on. It was a fake ideological formation. It was brutal global capitalism with a human face.
Let's speak a bit about Hillary Clinton's coalition. There's a lot of parallels drawn between the election of Trump and the vote for Brexit in the UK, both big political shocks in 2016. Hillary's campaign saw a massive uniting of media, of actors, celebrities, musicians, a huge uniting of stars and politicians, same as we saw in Brexit. So you said that the US machine, so-called, failed to manufacture consent among people. Why do you think that failure took place?
Yeah. I think it's part of a general crisis of Western democratic system. And here I'm again pessimist. The way developed capitalist countries manufactured consent and enabled their own reproduction no longer works. People are confused, perplexed, full of fears, insatisfied, and this is again a very dangerous moment. It opens up the space for right-wing populist, more authoritarian regimes, but at the same time, a space for more authentic left. So again, I think that it's not just a phenomenon which happens in some countries. The same thing is basically happening all around Europe, in France, in Germany, in Scandinavian countries, and so on and so on. We are witnessing a terrifying earthquake. All political coordinates are being shaken up. And this is the point of not losing nerves, as many liberals are doing now in the United States, just traumatized, fascinated, like as if you are looking into a snake eyes. Trump, what to do? We are in a panic. No, now it's the time for cold assessment and strategic thinking.
Slavoj, as you said, we're witnessing a political earthquake, not only in America, in the UK, but also in Europe. Marie Le Pen, for example, predicted now to reach the second round in the French presidential elections next year. The left wing has taken a lot of the blame, a lot of the criticism here for failing to unite, for failing to provide an alternative here. What needs to happen for the left to provide a real alternative here, to stop this rise of right-wing reactionary forces we're seeing across the whole of the globe?
I don't have a simple answer, but one step, for me the crucial one, is to do what Bernie Sanders succeeded, to mobilize those dissatisfied small people, to mobilize those voters which are often fall prey to the right-wing populism, to stop this despising, arrogant criticism of stupid, ordinary people who fall into the trap of populism and so on, to mobilize their energy, to get them of our side. Because otherwise, radical left will remain stuck into this elitist academic mode of fighting for minorities, LGBT, and so on, totally, almost totally ignoring the anxieties, fears of ordinary people. We need to do in every country in a different way of what to some extent Bernie Sanders succeeded in, to find direct appeal to these anxieties, rage of ordinary people. Otherwise, they, the right-wing racist populists, will get them. That's the absolute key for me.
And you mentioned there the trap of falling into populism and racism, etc. Some of the liberal Americans who are very angry about the election of Trump, they're calling for his impeachment. They're blaming what they call uneducated people for electing him. Is that really where the blame lies? People just not being educated enough to make the right decision?
That's the horror. No, but it's not. This is so patronizing. You see, this is the typical liberal elite way. Non-educated, ordinary people, and so on. No, the liberal educated elite, they failed them. They failed them. It's the true loser is the liberal elite, which simply lost contact with anxieties and so on of the ordinary people. And liberal elites, I suspect them of this smug self-satisfaction. They even like to lose so that they can then, with a moralistic self-satisfaction, blame the others. You see, primitive, ordinary people, why are they primitive? They were not always primitive. They fall into these primitive passions because the alternative, what they, the elite, was offering them no longer works. So again, begin with self-criticism.
Let's get back to the development of international relations here with the Trump presidency. There's a concern among many EU leaders about a stepping back from the usual American policy of internationalism, falling into isolationism here. Do you think, with Trump as president, the US will be able to still be a key leader within the EU?
No, I'm a pessimist here, because I think that, as you already hinted, what will happen is that we will get, that's the danger I see, the worst of both worlds. We will have the worst of this traditional Republican isolationism combined with the worst of Reagan, Bush mode of international aggressivity. That's what I fear. There will be more wars, but less genuine international cooperation. Look, it's clear from the hints that you get from the Trump side what to do in Syria or in all these critical points. They oscillate between the two extremes. One is isolationism, the other is let's just bomb them all, and so on.
What about NATO? There's a concern here, certainly from Trump's comments. He said that NATO countries haven't been paying their way. He's hinted that America might rethink its NATO commitment. He said that if NATO collapses, then so be it. That's certainly another concern.
I don't take this seriously. Yeah, this is but this is, I think, I think Trump is playing here with fire. Economists, like even my friend Varoufakis, demonstrated clearly how much United States profits internationally from the position of dollar as global currency, from attracting investments from all the world, and so on and so on. I think that isolationism would have been a catastrophe for America, even economically at the long term. America's prosperity is based on, as Varoufakis put it, on functioning as a global minotaur, sucking the money from all the world. I mean, everybody knows how United States function. On average, at least this was 2-3 years ago still, United States receive in different forums, like from banking investments, they receive $1 billion per day from other countries. And if all this is perturbed, I predict a quick regress of United States into a second-rate country.
Slavoj Žižek, Slovenian philosopher.
Into just one of the local superpowers.
All right, Slavoj Žižek, Slovenian philosopher, thanks for joining us today. Great to talk to you on the Trump election. Great to get your analysis and insight today here on RT International. Thank you again.
Yes, and my greetings to you from, as you can see, the rainy, grey New York weather fits the atmosphere.